A father walks out of his home on a freezing morning without saying why, and he never sends a single letter for 6 long years. His wife is left working 2 jobs, raising their 2 little children alone, and his young son begins losing his eyesight day by day. People in town whisper, "He abandoned them. He ran away." No real man disappears like that. And honestly, who wouldn't be angry? A sick child, a struggling mother, and a father who vanished into thin air. But what if the truth behind his disappearance was nothing like anyone imagined? Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? And if stories of faith, family, and unexpected miracles touch your heart, please subscribe to join our community. Now, let's begin. The morning air in Willow Creek, Montana, carried a brittle chill that hinted winter had not fully released its grip. Frost clung stubbornly to the wooden fences, and a thin layer of ice sparkled across rooftops as the muted sun tried to force its way through heavy gray clouds. The small town, surrounded by open fields and dense pine forests, felt quiet, almost hushed, as if holding its breath for something unknown. Inside a modest single-story house on the edge of town, warmth and the smell of pancakes softened the starkness of the cold day. This home belonged to the Turner family, a family known for kindness and for living simply, without luxury, but full of love. Michael Turner, 36, stood near the kitchen window, watching the frosted glass fog slightly from the heat of his coffee mug. Michael had the rugged appearance of a lifelong laborer, a square jaw with faint stubble, short, dark brown hair peppered with early traces of gray, and deep blue eyes shaped by years of quiet endurance. His shoulders were broad, his hands calloused, yet his expression was gentle, especially when he looked at his family. People in town often said Michael had the face of a man who had been hardened by work, but softened by love. Behind him, Laura Turner bustled around the small kitchen. Laura, 32, was a petite woman with an oval, warm-toned face, soft hazel eyes, and chestnut hair pulled into a loose braid that draped over her shoulder. Her demeanor radiated patience and resilience. Despite the fatigue lingering beneath her eyes, she always moved with a nurturing grace that made the house feel safe. Their son, Ethan, a lively 4-year-old, Gene, played on the living room carpet nearby. His tousled dark hair framed hazel eyes that squinted whenever bright light hit them. Though he didn't understand his sensitivity, he instinctively shaded his eyes with his small hands. Ethan was affectionate, curious, and always eager to follow his father, mimicking every gesture like a shadow. Emily, only 1 year old, Jen, toddled around with unsteady steps. Her tiny frame, fluffy blonde curls, and bright blue eyes made her look like a little winter angel. She often clung to her mother's legs, babbling excitedly in half-formed words. The atmosphere was peaceful until the doorbell rang. Standing on the porch was Dr. Carter Hayes, Michael's longtime friend from high school. Carter was 42, tall and lean with sandy blonde hair, a neatly groomed beard, and sharp blue eyes softened by years of compassion. As a physician at the Willow Creek Clinic, he had earned a reputation for honesty and steadiness, even when delivering difficult news. Today, however, his expression carried a heaviness. "Michael," Carter greeted quietly. "Can we talk for a moment?" Michael knew something was wrong. He led Carter into the living room while Laura remained with the children in the kitchen. Carter clasped his hands, choosing his words carefully. "It's about Ethan." Michael felt his stomach clench. "What about him?" Carter lowered his voice. The results from your family's recent checkup came back. Ethan shows early signs of retinitis pigmentosa. It's a degenerative eye condition. His vision is fine now, but over the next several years, it will worsen, potentially to the point of serious vision loss. The world seemed to still. Michael stared at his friend, numb. Is there treatment? There is, Carter nodded, but it's expensive, very expensive. The kind of specialized surgery and long-term care that insurance rarely covers fully. It would take substantial money, more than most families here could gather quickly. Michael's eyes drifted toward the kitchen, where laughter floated from Ethan and Emily. His chest tightened. He imagined Ethan in darkness, unable to see the world he loved exploring. Carter continued carefully. I thought you should know privately first. I didn't want to overwhelm Laura until you both were ready to decide what to do. Michael nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of every word. When Carter left, Michael remained seated in silence, staring at his trembling hands. Laura entered moments later, sensing something wrong. Michael, she asked softly, what happened? He forced a smile, gentle but strained. Nothing important. Just Carter stopping by to check on the kids' growth charts. Everything's normal. But inside, he felt the crushing truth. He could not let his son go blind. That night, long after Laura and the children had fallen asleep, Michael sat alone at the kitchen table with the medical report spread before him. He read it again and again. The treatment cost made his stomach twist. He knew what he had to do. Before dawn, he packed a duffel bag quietly. His hands moved mechanically. Extra shirt, work boots, flashlight, and a small envelope of emergency savings. He looked at his sleeping children one last time. Ethan's tiny hand rested near his forehead. Emily's soft breathing filled the room. On the floor beside the bed lay a loyal figure, Ranger, Michael's 2-year-old German shepherd. Ranger had a strong build, thick black and tan fur, intelligent amber eyes, and alert ears that twitched at the slightest sound. Though young, Ranger was fiercely loyal and remarkably intuitive. He sensed Michael's distress instantly, rising and brushing his head against Michael's leg as if asking where they were going. Michael whispered, "You're coming with me, boy." When Laura woke, she found a note on the kitchen table. Her hands shook as she read it. Laura, I love you more than anything. I'm going to find work in another state. Don't worry about me. Take care of the kids. I promise I'll come back. Her breath caught, and tears blurred her vision. She didn't know the real reason. Michael had chosen not to tell her about Ethan's condition, fearing it would break her heart. She sank into a chair, clutching the note. Despite her pain, a small part of her still believed Michael would return. The first winter after Michael left passed slowly, stretching into a quiet ache that settled inside the Turner home. Laura worked tirelessly to keep everything together, taking double shifts at a small diner on the corner of Willow Creek's main street. The diner, owned by Martha Kellens, a stout woman in her late 50s with curly gray hair and warm brown eyes, became Laura's second home. Martha had a round face softened by laugh lines, and her personality radiated the kind of motherly firmness that came from decades of raising 4 sons on her own. She noticed Laura's exhaustion immediately and gave her flexible hours, often slipping leftover meals into Laura's hands with a gentle, "Take this home for the kids." Martha was not a major presence in town politics or business, but she was respected for her kindness, and her diner served as a haven for weary townsfolk. While Laura struggled in Montana, Michael was far away, drifting from one harsh job to another across the rugged landscapes of the American West. He and Ranger traveled through Wyoming, Idaho, and Colorado, relying on temporary construction sites and seasonal labor for income. Ranger, now 8 years old, had grown into a powerful German shepherd with dense black and tan fur, sharp amber eyes, and a protective instinct sharpened by years on the road. He was highly alert, quick to sense danger, and fiercely loyal to Michael, never letting him out of sight. On one construction site in Wyoming, Michael narrowly avoided a collapsing scaffolding when Ranger barked desperately, pulling on his pant leg to warn him. The wooden planks crashed to the ground seconds after Michael stepped back. The site foreman, Hank Delaney, a broad-shouldered man with a thick beard and sun-weathered skin, witnessed the moment. Hank was in his late 40s, gruff and intimidating at first glance. But years of hard labor and a failed marriage had given him a quiet understanding of human struggle. "You got yourself a damn smart dog," he grunted approvingly, patting Ranger's head with a rare smile. Hank wasn't a close friend, but he respected men who worked hard, and Michael was one of the hardest workers he had ever hired. Months later, in a remote logging camp in Idaho, Michael faced another life-threatening moment when a steel lifting cable snapped, whipping dangerously close to his head. Ranger reacted instantly, pushing Michael aside with a forceful shove. The cable ripped through the air where Michael had been standing. The camp supervisor, Calvin Ross, a wiry man with thinning blonde hair and a sharp nose, rushed over pale-faced. Calvin was naturally anxious, always fearing lawsuits or accidents, but he was deeply grateful. "That dog might have saved your life," he stammered. Calvin wasn't someone Michael would call a friend, but he offered bonus pay and easier assignments after the incident, recognizing the gravity of what could have happened. Life on the road hardened Michael, carving deeper lines into his once soft features. His stubble grew thicker, the gray in his hair spreading faster. But the loneliness, more than the labor, shaped him most. Each night he lay awake beside Ranger, staring at dark motel ceilings or canvas tent roofs, wondering how much Ethan and Emily had grown, whether Laura still held hope, and whether he would ever earn enough to save his son's vision. He kept every paycheck, living frugally, refusing to spend $1 more than necessary. He wanted to call. He wanted to hear Laura's voice, hear his children laughing in the background. But he knew Carter was right. If he allowed himself that comfort, he might abandon the mission. And so he stayed silent. Back in Montana, Laura's life became a blur of repetition. Work, house chores, bills, then more work. Ethan and Emily grew quickly. Ethan, now 10, had become gentle and thoughtful, a boy with dark hair and hazel eyes that still squinted slightly in bright light. His sensitivity to light had worsened. Sometimes he rubbed his eyes, frustrated when they didn't focus as clearly as before. Emily, now 7, had grown into a spirited girl with long blonde curls, bright blue eyes, and a protective love for her brother. Whenever Ethan struggled, she would take his hand without being asked, guiding him through hallways, playgrounds, or grocery store aisles. The absence of their father shaped them. Ethan became more cautious and introspective, while Emily became louder, braver, trying to fill the emotional gaps around her. Laura did her best, reading bedtime stories, cooking warm meals, and holding both children through every fear and every tear. But some nights, after the children slept, she sat alone at the kitchen table staring at Michael's old handwritten note, wondering whether he was still alive. As the 6th year approached, Ethan's eyesight began to deteriorate faster. He struggled to read the chalkboard at school, often blinking rapidly or leaning forward until his nose almost touched the paper. His teacher, Ms. Valerie Green, a tall woman with curly black hair and deep brown skin, noticed immediately. Ms. Green was firm but compassionate, known for watching her students closely. She called Laura one afternoon, her voice gentle yet concerned as she explained Ethan's difficulties in class. Laura felt her heart sink. She scheduled an appointment at the clinic, remembering how Michael always handled the medical concerns. At the hospital, a new specialist, Dr. Simon Clark, examined Ethan. Dr. Clark was a calm man in his late 30s with light brown hair, rectangular glasses, and a mild, professional voice. He reviewed Ethan's scans, exhaled slowly, then delivered the sentence that shattered Laura. "Your son needs surgery soon. It cannot wait many more years." Laura's legs almost gave out. She held Ethan's hand tightly, tears pooling in her eyes. She had no savings, no insurance strong enough to cover the cost, and no husband present to share the burden. 6 years of silence had led to this moment, and Laura felt completely alone. The winter storm rolled into Willow Creek with a brutality that made the town seem even smaller than it already was. Thick curtains of snow whipped through the air, coating rooftops and blanketing the roads until everything appeared muted, swallowed in white. The wind howled between the narrow houses like a warning, and most families stayed tucked inside, huddled near their heaters. Laura Turner had just finished closing the curtains to keep the cold out when a firm knocking echoed through the house. She froze. For 6 years, no one had knocked on her door at this hour. With a cautious breath, she stepped toward the entrance. Ethan and Emily peeked from the hallway, the little girl gripping her brother's sleeve tightly. The storm raged behind her, rattling the windows, but the sound at the door persisted, steady, cold, familiar in a way that made her stomach tighten. She opened the door. Standing on the porch was a figure she almost didn't recognize at first. Michael Turner, once strong and full of warmth, now appeared gaunt and weathered. His cheeks were hollowed by years of labor. His beard had grown thicker with streaks of gray, and his once bright blue eyes had dimmed beneath exhaustion and cold. His coat, once durable, was frayed at the edges, patched with mismatched fabric, dust, and dried mud from countless work sites. Snow clung to his shoulders, and his breath came out in fogged bursts. Beside him stood Ranger. The German shepherd, now older and stronger than ever, had thick fur matted with frost and dirt. His amber eyes remained sharp, alert, protective. Ranger's presence was imposing but calm. He stood close to Michael, leaning slightly forward as if prepared for anything. Even in age, he still bore himself proudly, a loyal soldier guarding his companion. The moment stretched in silence before Laura's expression shifted from shock to disbelief, then to a deep, visceral anger. Her voice cracked before rising into a fury she had held in her chest for 6 long years. "Michael Turner, how dare you come back here?" Michael opened his mouth, but no words came out. Laura didn't wait. She grabbed the nearest object, a broom leaning against the entryway, and stepped onto the porch despite the cold biting at her feet. "You left!" she shouted, each word trembling with grief. "You left me alone! You left the kids without a father! 6 years, Michael, 6 years without a single letter, a single call, nothing!" She swung the broom, not to hurt him, but to push him away. Ranger immediately stepped forward, placing himself between the broom and Michael. He did not growl or bare his teeth. Instead, he simply stood in her path, solid and unmoving. His protective instinct was clear. but his eyes showed no aggression, only loyalty. Laura stumbled back a step, shocked by the dog's calm but firm barrier. The children watched from the doorway. Ethan, though frightened, recognized something in the worn man, standing in the snow. Emily clung to her brother's arm, her blue eyes wide. The fear in their expressions cut deeper into Michael than the icy wind ever could. Michael finally found his voice, though it shook with cold and regret. "Laura, please, just listen. I didn't leave because I wanted to. I did it for Ethan." Laura's grip on the broom loosened. The anger in her eyes flickered, replaced momentarily by confusion. "For Ethan?" she whispered. "What are you talking about?" Michael took a small step forward, but Ranger stayed close by his side. Snowflakes gathered in Michael's beard as he lowered his head, unable to hold her gaze. "I didn't know how to tell you. Carter gave me the results 6 years ago. Ethan's eyes. The condition. I knew we couldn't afford treatment. I thought if I worked long enough, hard enough, I could save him." The words wavered, heavy with the weight of the truth he had carried alone for years. "I didn't contact you because, if I did, I wouldn't have been able to stay away. I knew I'd come back too soon." His voice broke. "I couldn't let him lose his sight. I couldn't." Laura stood still, her emotions twisting. Anger, disbelief, heartbreak. Everything collided at once. For years she had lived with resentment and abandonment, creating stories in her mind to survive the silence. Hearing his reason did not erase the pain, but it shook the ground beneath her certainty. She lowered the broom completely. Ethan stepped forward timidly. His hazel eyes, still squinting under the porch light, studied the man carefully. After a long pause, Ethan whispered, "Dad?" Michael's breath caught. He hadn't heard that word in 6 years. "Yeah, buddy," he said softly, tears forming. "It's me." Laura's shoulders collapsed as she pressed a hand over her mouth, caught between sobbing and breathing. The storm continued roaring around them, but inside that small porch, the world had narrowed to a fragile reunion suspended between pain and understanding. Ranger sat next to Michael, glancing between the children and Laura as if waiting for permission to approach. For the first time since opening the door, Laura's gaze met Michael's fully. Her voice softened, barely. "Come inside. We can talk." The cold wind swirled behind them as Michael nodded, stepping toward the warmth of the home he had feared he might never see again. The living room felt smaller than usual as the storm continued to batter the house from outside. Michael stood near the doorway, snow still melting from his shoulders, while Laura kept a cautious distance, her emotions shifting unpredictably between anger, shock, and something softer she wasn't ready to name. Ethan and Emily stayed close together, hovering near the hallway, unsure whether to step closer or stay back. Ranger sat loyally at Michael's side, his thick fur damp from the snow, yet his posture steady and alert. Laura finally exhaled shakily and gestured toward the small table near the couch. "Sit, all of you." Her voice trembled, not with anger anymore, but with the weight of 6 years' worth of unanswered questions. Michael nodded and slowly removed his worn backpack, placing it on the table. Its fabric was frayed at the seams, a map of the long journey he had endured. With careful movements, he unzipped it and pulled out a thin folder wrapped in a clear plastic sleeve. The edges were creased, the ink slightly faded, but the documents inside were unmistakably important. He laid it gently on the table and pushed it toward Laura. Laura hesitated before taking the folder. Her hands trembled as she peeled open the cover to reveal the medical report dated 6 years earlier. Her eyes scanned the page. Ethan's name, the diagnosis, the projected progression of the disease. Her breath caught in her throat. Michael spoke quietly, his voice raw. I found out the day we all went in for the checkup. Carter told me privately. He knew how scared I'd be. I didn't tell you because I knew it would break you. And we didn't have the money. No insurance, no savings, nothing. He swallowed, rubbing his hands together as if reliving every sleepless night. I thought if I could find work in bigger construction sites, oil fields, logging camps, any place that paid well enough, we could afford the surgery before his sight got worse. Laura shook her head slowly, tears forming again. But why didn't you call? Why didn't you write? I waited every day, Michael, every single day. He lowered his head, the guilt thick in his voice. Because I knew myself. If I heard your voice, or the kids, I wouldn't have been able to keep going. I barely made it through as it was. His fingers curled into the fabric of his jeans. I promised myself I'd come back only when I had enough, and every time I thought I was close, something happened. Ranger let out a soft whine, as if remembering the countless dangers alongside him. Michael continued, his eyes distant. There were cave-ins at the mining site in Idaho. Ranger warned me just in time, pulled me back before the floor collapsed. Another time, in a steel yard, a crane cable snapped and nearly took my head off. He paused, exhaling shakily. I had to take every job I could, even the dangerous ones. And Ranger, he saved my life more times than I can count. Laura pressed her hand over her mouth, her voice barely audible. All this time, you were fighting to save our son. Michael nodded. Every day, every hour, that was the only thing that kept me moving. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the storm raging outside. Laura closed the folder and held it against her chest. Tears streamed down her cheeks, falling without resistance. 6 years of anger unraveled inside her. 6 years of fear, resentment, loneliness, but now replaced with grief for what Michael had endured alone. Without another word, she stepped forward and collapsed into him, her arms wrapping tightly around his shoulders. I thought you left us, she whispered through sobs. I thought you didn't want this family anymore. Michael held her just as tightly, burying his face in her hair. I never left you. Not here, he said, tapping his chest. You and the kids were the only reason I survived. Seeing their parents embrace, Ethan and Emily moved closer. Emily was the first to reach them, her small arms circling her mother's leg. Ethan joined a moment later, placing a gentle hand on Michael's arm. Michael looked down at them, overwhelmed. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry for everything. Ethan stepped closer until he was pressed against his father's side. Emily followed, wrapping her arms around all 3 of them. The family stood united for the first time in 6 long years, their shadows merging under the dim living room light. Ranger lay down at Michael's feet, placing his head gently over Ethan's shoe, as if silently promising he would protect this family just as fiercely as he had protected Michael. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the Turner home, something fragile and precious began to heal. The morning air outside the regional medical center was crisp, the kind of cold that hinted at the slow end of winter. Sunlight scattered across the hospital's glass entrance, casting soft reflections that danced along the floors inside. It was a striking contrast to the Turner family's anxious hearts as they stepped through the wide automatic doors. Michael held Ethan's hand firmly, while Laura guided Emily, who clung nervously to her mother's coat. Ranger walked closely beside Ethan, his head level with the boy's arm, sensing the tension in every step. The ophthalmology wing was calm and bright, painted in soft shades of blue meant to soothe nervous patients. A tall woman in a white coat approached them. This was Dr. Helena Morris, the surgeon assigned to Ethan's case. She was in her early 40s, with straight black hair pulled into a low bun, cool gray eyes, and a slender, athletic build that spoke of discipline. Her posture was impeccable, and her movements deliberate, traits shaped by years of performing delicate surgeries. Though serious at first glance, her voice carried a reassuring warmth. "Ethan Turner?" she asked gently. "I'll be taking care of you today." She knelt to Ethan's level, offering a small smile. "I heard you're very brave." Ethan swallowed nervously but nodded. Ranger nudged his elbow, prompting a tiny smile from him. As Dr. Morris guided the family toward pre-op, a nurse named Oliver Reyes joined them. Oliver was a short, round man in his 30s with curly dark hair, soft brown eyes, and a gentle demeanor. His cheerful nature and calm tone instantly put children at ease. "We'll take good care of him," he assured Laura, handing Ethan a small blanket decorated with cartoon stars. "This one helps kids feel like superheroes." Inside the preoperative room, with its humming machines and crisp disinfectant smell, Ranger lay down next to Ethan's bed. The German Shepherd, now 8 years old, rested his head near Ethan's hand. His amber eyes followed everyone who entered the room, alert but calm, knowing somehow that today was important. Laura stroked Ethan's hair, trying to hide the tremble in her fingers. Michael stood at the foot of the bed, his jaw tight with emotion. "You're going to be okay, buddy," he said softly. "You're stronger than anyone I know." A few moments later, Oliver returned. "Time to take our little hero in." Ethan squeezed Ranger's fur one more time before Oliver gently wheeled him away. Ranger let out a quiet whine, ears tilted forward, but Laura knelt and placed a hand on his back. "He'll be back soon," she whispered. The waiting room felt unbearably still. Hours passed slowly, with only the rhythmic ticking of a wall clock and the soft chatter of nurses to break the silence. Emily sat curled on Laura's lap, twisting her fingers anxiously. Michael paced, unable to sit still. Every time a doctor walked by, he lifted his head with a spark of hope that quickly sank again. Finally, Dr. Morris appeared. Her posture was confident, her expression warm. "The surgery went very well," she announced. Relief washed over the family so fast that Laura covered her face with both hands, tears already spilling. Michael let out a shaky breath, pressing a hand against his chest, as if steadying his heart. Emily buried her face against her mother's shoulder. Ranger barked once, soft, excited, almost relieved. "When he wakes," Dr. Morris continued, "he'll still need time to adjust. His vision will improve gradually over the next weeks, but everything looks positive." When Ethan was brought to recovery, he looked small beneath the blankets, his eyes covered with protective shields. Yet the moment he heard Ranger's footsteps, he smiled. "Ranger," he whispered, reaching blindly toward the familiar sound. The dog immediately pressed his nose into Ethan's hand, tail wagging gently. The days that followed were filled with cautious hope. Ethan returned home with eye drops, follow-up appointments, and strict instructions to rest. Slowly, the fog in Ethan's vision lifted. First, he recognized blurry shapes, then colors sharpened, then outlines of faces. Each day brought small victories that made the whole family breathe easier. One afternoon, a warm breeze swept across the backyard as sunlight streamed through freshly budding branches. The grass shimmered with early spring growth, and tiny wildflowers dotted the edges of the yard. This was the first day Ethan was allowed to play outside again. Ranger bounded ahead with youthful excitement, despite his age. Ethan ran after him, laughing as the dog darted left and right, tail wagging happily. Emily chased them both, her blonde curls bouncing with every step. Laura watched them from the porch, her hand resting gently in Michael's. He squeezed her fingers, his eyes misting as he took in the sight of Ethan, his son, running freely with clear, bright vision returning day by day. For a long moment, the world felt whole again. Michael turned to Laura, voice steady but full of emotion. "I'm never leaving this family again," he said. "Not ever." Laura leaned into him, her eyes soft. "Good," she whispered, "because we're whole only when we're together." As the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the yard, the Turner family stood unified, stronger than before, bound not by perfection, but by endurance, sacrifice, and love that had survived 6 long years of silence. There are moments in life when everything feels heavy, when the silence is too long, when the road ahead looks impossible. But sometimes, in the middle of the storm, God places a quiet miracle in our path. For Michael and his family, that miracle came in the form of love that refused to give up. Love that walked through danger, carried burdens in silence, and returned home even after years of darkness. And maybe, just maybe, it was God who guided Michael's steps, protected Ranger through every night, and held little Ethan's sight in his hands until the right moment came. In our own lives, we may not always see the miracles right away, but they are there, hidden in the kindness of others, in the strength we didn't know we had, in the love that keeps families together, and in the faith that carries us through the hardest chapters. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to share it with someone who might need a reminder that God is still working, even in the silence. Leave a comment below and tell us, what miracle has God done in your life, big or small? And if you believe in the power of love, hope, and God's protection over every family, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any stories like this. May God bless you, your family, and everyone watching today. May He guide your steps, protect your home, and fill your heart with peace. God bless you all. Amen.